So here's a little known feature in ProffieOS, and I'm assuming it's little known. I don't know. I just found out about it not too long ago when building my prop file, talking to Frederick. There's been something in place called user-defined effects. If you look in your ProffieOS common Sabre base file, right? Open that guy up and you get this. Okay. In this file, here's where all the effects that we can use are defined. Clash, blast, force, stab, blah, 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 right? And we've used these all the time. And the way you use this effect blast, for example, to view it in the style editor is, like you pull up transition effect. This is the default that fills in. This is saying, do this tr concat of these two wipes with white when we do blast, right? So you hit the blast, boom, 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 there you go. Well, when you click this effect, you have these options to change it to. It could be maybe I wanted that to happen when I hit the preon instead. And that's where you would build your preon effect. So you hit preon. Now it's triggered by preon, not by blast, right? So this is what is going to trigger this transition effect layer contents to happen. Okay. So we've seen here, these are the options you can change it to. Well, that's because if you go back to this is where that comes from. These are where they're defined. Okay, and these all match what's in this list is what's in this list. Well, down here at the bottom, which is not in the list in Style Editor, are these user definable effects. And these have been here the whole time, 1 through 5. So we have 5 totally open, not used effects that are ready to go in ProffieOS. You just need to use them for what you want. All right, so how do we do that? Well, the syntax would basically be the same as the way you're changing it here from blast to preon. This just basically becomes user 1 or user 2 or user 3 or whatever you have it set up to be. And you stick that in your blade style, and when you trigger effect user 3, it's going to do this. Okay, well, how do we trigger effect user 3? There's no blast or stab, clash, or anything normal. How do we do this? Well, that's done in the prop file. And if you look at a prop file, like I'm just going to pull up mine, these are the button events that happen. They're in a case that's inside a switch. It's constantly listening for these button events to happen, right? So when you twist while holding the power button, it's going to do whatever's underneath here until you return. So this will turn on color change mode, and this will do the force, right? So you can, as you see here, user. What I did was I just added a user. I tagged it here with a comment, user 3 effect. What is it going to do? Well, I want to, when I have no button pressed and the saber is off, if I clash, please trigger effect user 3, which is done with this. Now, how did I know it's going to be this? I really just copied something else. Like, let me find force somewhere in here. Okay. Not that one. So force push. This was already built. This comes from FET263s. It's a direct copy, basically. The force push is set up so that when it detects a push, if it's been more than 2 seconds since the last push, and if you have a sound effect called push, it'll play the sound effect push. Otherwise, it's just going to play and do the force thing, like the same as if you did your force effect. But this syntax here, calling hybrid fonts effect, do effect, effect force, is the template. So I literally copied that and changed this to user 3 here, and that's it. So when I want to trigger whatever I build into the style with this user 3, it's going to get triggered when I do this, which for the glow stick thing I just did with the rave style, I wanted to do like a preon, but not preon specifically, because that automatically dumps into ignition. When it's done playing the wave file, it's going to automatically turn on. I wanted to manually turn on when I shook the saber. So I didn't want it to be a pre-on effect, so I used a user-defined effect. So when I clash, which is like the cracking of the glow stick to start the color, when this blade is off, it's going to trigger user effect 3. So if we look at the blade style, you can see here, this is a very basic blade style. It's just a main base color of a pulsing green yellow with black. It's got its fade in and fade out extension and retraction. But on top of that layer, which when you write it out is underneath it, this whole thing, this would normally be the pre-on kind of area. And here you can see I've got user 3, user 3. So instead of pre-on triggering it, user 3 is going to trigger it. How do I trigger user 3? Well, I set it up to be a clash when the blade is off. So that's how that works. And what else? So that's where that gets set up. If you want to get fancy and go level 2, because you've now defined this user 3 to be called when you clash, you can also down here in the effects section have it make a sound. If you had a specific sound, you wanted to trigger a quote or you wanted to trigger something else. The same way power save, this was already here and set up. So just taking from this template, I copied for other things. I already had user 1, user 2 set up. Now I've set up user 3. So if I put a sound called rave.wave in my font folder, when I trigger effect user 3 here, it's going to say, hey, do you have a rave wave file in your font? If it does, it's going to play one of them randomly with this command here. So that's how you can tie a sound. One precursor to this is if you're going to call a sound like this, up at the top of the file, in the global scope, you need to add, along with all the other ones like dim, battery, volume menu, right? You would add it here just like that. So I put in effect rave. So technically when I clash the blade, when the saber's off, it's going to do the user 3 effect that I define in the blade style, which is here, and it's going to play a sound called rave.number, whatever number. If you have multiples, it'll choose a random, or if you just have one, it'll play 1. And that is how you use a user-defined effect. And there's 5 of them to choose from. Have at it.